and welcome to this MTG Arena Pauper Primer from your friends at Supraliminal Films, Supraliminal Games team. I'm Dan, and you got with me Max. Say hello, Max.
Max team.
And this time, just like the last two videos we've done, we're going to talk about Pauper on MTG Arena. What is Pauper? Pauper is the format that is defined by all commons. On MTG Arena, that means all commons that are only available in Standard. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, Pauper's back, and this time we have less cards, but we have a bunch of new cards.
Yes, we have cards we didn't have before, but we also don't have a lot of cards we did have before, like a lot of artifacts.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we did lose an entire artifact-themed block, so
that's right.
We are out of a lot of artifacts. So, because Standard Pauper is not something that is wildly played among Magic circles, it is very uncommon for people to think about it, and thereby there aren't exactly a lot of what you might call archetypal decks. So we're going to start this off by talking about where you might think to start if you're going to build a deck, if you're looking at your collection on Arena and you're looking at your commons and what you have access to. The first thing you really want to focus on is making sure that you have a plan.
Yeah, 100%. These aren't really like Standard decks, and they're certainly not like Modern or Legacy decks in that you don't have a crazy ability to stall till you hit this, or try to get an engine online, or I'm going to use this card. It's all fairly... I mean, it's pretty much you're trying to execute a proactive game plan in the same sense you are in Limited. So you
in a certain way, it's very much like Constructed Limited.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And even Pauper is a little bit more towards a constructed format than this is. This is a little bit more like super limited than it is like a constructed style. So you definitely want to have a plan from first spell to last spell. You want to have a game plan in place, not just, well, eventually I'll do this, or I'll build around this particular card and get to that.
You want to be as efficient as you possibly can.
Yep. Every card should have a purpose.
Yep, you don't want to put a card in your deck just because it fits your curve if it doesn't do anything on your curve. A great example of this that Max and I have been talking about a fair bit ourselves lately is the fact that there are a lot of effectively curved and costed creatures with the type Goblin in Standard right now at Common. But there's no benefit to doing that over anything else.
Right, and that's a great example. And you can see on the screen now I have up my decks that I have so far crafted in anticipation of this new Pauper, because we love Pauper around these parts.
We do.
And one of the decks I have is a tribal deck, and it's Pauper Pirates. So I will pull that up while we talk for a moment about tribal, because I do think there is a payoff for this particular tribe, and I think that payoff is Pirates Cutlass. This was a very high common pick in the Limited, especially in Triple Ixalan. This was one of the more revered picks, because it's the 3 cost that comes in and immediately gives a creature +2/+1.
That's big stats in an all commons format.
Yeah, this takes your Fanatical Firebrands and makes them 3/2s. It takes your Headstrong Brutes and makes them 5/4s. Like, it takes your Trailblazers and makes them 4/2s with Menace. This all can happen. Like, Goblin Trailblazers is a great example. You play it on 2, you play Cutlass on 3. You're coming in for 4 with Menace on turn 3.
There's very few decks that can interact with that.
Yeah, that's big numbers. And we'll talk, as we go on, we'll talk a little bit more about how to build your decks in more precise ways and a little bit more detail. But Tribal, Dan brings up a great example, and we saw a lot of this when we did our first Pauper Primer, which I'll put a link for both in the description, and I will put a card up during this part of the video, hopefully, if I'm smart enough to remember this whilst I am editing, that around the 4.5 minute mark, I should put the card up for the deck, for the link to the first Pauper Primer, and we talk about a lot of this basics in there, that Merfolk, Goblins, you gotta, like, they just don't have that they don't have a lord, they don't have some way to pay this off. But I think that pirates in this circumstance actually do, because you get a really low curve, some of the access to great removal, and Pirate's Cutlass is a payoff.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you completely. And I think that thinking about your payoff is a huge thing to do. And I also think thinking about what your deck's type is very important, right? Are you an aggro deck? Are you a mid-range deck? Are you a control deck? If you're an aggro deck, you gotta be ready to go 1-drop, 2-drop, either a 1-drop and a 2-drop or a 3-drop, and then continue to do that until you run out of cards. Are you a mid-range deck? You better have a sweeper, and the sweepers are limited in this format, so you better have some knowledge of how you're going to beat that deck that goes 1-drop, 2-drop, multiple 1-drops and 2-drops, and continues doing it until you're dead. Are you a control deck, which we did not see a ton of control the last time Pauper was around, and I mean, we've got Dimir now, so maybe, but all you can do is stop your opponent. Eventually you're going to run out of counterspells, and they're going to keep drawing spells. You have to have a way to actually close out a game if you are the control deck.
Yeah, and that's a great point, is understand your role in the game. And we all have heard the classic, who's the beat down? And if you're not familiar with that, that's simply identifying what your role in the game is. Are you the person who's trying to kill the other player very quickly, or are you trying to stop the momentum and create a long game where you take over with more powerful cards? For example, this pirate deck that I still have up on the screen here is absolutely an aggro deck. You can see the curve: 17 1-drops, 12 2-drops, 10 3-drops, and that is it. That's the top of our curve. And so we want to be beating down as much as possible. I don't have powerful cards that do things in the late game. I'm trying to take advantage of a piece of equipment I play on turn 3 and power up a 2-drop with. That's how I'm trying to win this game. That's
because you want to be able to win before your mid-range opponent comes online, or before your control opponent has a chance to actually do whatever it is they're trying to do.
Right. I don't want them playing creatures that block multiple creatures, or a big creature that stacks up better against my single creature, or whatever, playing a sweeper, goodness forbid, in a deck like this with a lot of 1-butts. That's the kind of stuff you're trying really heavily to avoid. But other decks want to get to that point. So it's all about identifying exactly what your deck does, because you don't have a powerful card. Like, I won't just draw the Scarab God and win with it. You know what I mean? Not that you can play the Scarab God anymore, but you won't just be able to draw some ace in the hole. You won't be able to use your Azer's Gateway flipped with an expansion explosion to kill your opponent at some point. So I'll just eventually draw it because I'm drawing cards. That doesn't happen in Pauper.
You can't take a bunch of turns with your Lich's Mastery to keep you from dying.
No, so definitely know your role in this particular format.
And in addition to knowing your role, probably the next most important thing is to know your enemy.
Yeah.
What's going to be on the other side? Again, we don't have a defined metagame here, right? Like, if you go into a standard queue right now on Arena, discounting the fact that there's the deck strength matchmaking, where if you're using one of the starter decks, you're much more likely to face against another starter deck. Discounting deck strength matchmaking, if you go into a queue right now, you can guess pretty well, especially in the first couple of turns, what your opponent is trying to do. That's not the case in Pauper, because the metagame doesn't exist.
No,
we're going to be making it up as we go along over the course of the next couple of days, from when this video launches till the end of the weekend when the event goes away. But some things that we think, at least, are going to drive people in very easy directions are the starter decks.
Yeah.
Specifically the monocolor starter decks, because literally every player has, if you've played the game at all, you have all 5 of the monocolor starter decks, and if you've played the game for more than a week, you have the 10 two-color starter decks.
Yes.
And the specifically the white, green, and red starter decks, the monocolor starter decks, are all predominantly commons, and predominantly these aggro, in the case of the red and white decks, and mid-range ramp style green deck that fit within sort of logical old school Magic deck archetypes.
Right. Yeah. You have the white weenie deck. You have the mono red or red deck wins, and I'll pull up my Pauper version of that. And you will also have your green ramp deck. So you take out your Gigantosaurus, sorry Danny Trejo, and you put in your Colossal Dreadmauls or your Siege Worms or whatever you think.
Or both.
Yeah, if whatever you think the big appropriate finisher for the format is, there are definitely some. Those go in. And the reason we think they're going to be played heavily is because everybody, no matter how long they've been playing Arena, have access to these cards already.
Yeah, you start a brand new account day one, you drop $0 into it, and you have this and a couple of common wild cards that you can replace the stuff you took out with.
Yeah. And that is really important. Accessibility is a big factor in this particular, what do you want to call it, in this particular game, in this particular version of the game?
Format.
In this format? Well, I just meant Arena.
Well, yeah, in any constructed format, on Arena specifically, accessibility of cards is important unless you are the kind of person that dumped somewhere between probably $250 to $750 into the game and have gotten to a place where you may not have 4 of every card, but you have probably close to 1 of every card and 4 of most cards.
Right. So you have to be thoughtful about that as well. And the other thing a lot of players that are new will have access to is the guild pairs, because they likely have played the sealeds that were given out for free. If they went to a pre-release, they may have tried a draft and gotten a guild's draft early on. They may just be like us and prefer playing limited most of the time you hop on Arena because it's hard to get into a draft queue in person. So people are going to have access to these commons, these Sky Knight Legionnaires. They're going to have access to Dimir control style cards and Golgari mid-range cards. They're going to have access to all of that stuff because they've played in limited. So I think you can definitely expect with the single color decks that are coming out of the precons, you can also expect people having taken 3 or 4 of their drafts and merged them into one Pauper style deck with their Artful Takedowns and their Whisper Agents and things like that.
Absolutely. And I think that, that leads very well into what probably the most obvious archetypes are, at least again to us, and we're not perfect, but what we consider to be the most obvious archetypes right off the jump are Rat Colony, because you can play any number of them and it's a common. So all you need is 4 common wild cards and you can build the deck. Pretty much. It's
an important point to let newer players know as well. All you have to do is have 4 Rat Colony, and you can have the 30 that I have currently sitting up on my deck list.
Yeah, he didn't have to burn all those wild cards or open those in packs. He only had to open 4 of them.
That's right.
And then another one that we consider to be an obvious archetype is tokens, specifically like a Selesnya tokens kind of list, just because there's a lot of sap rolling tokens in Dominaria, and there's a lot of knight tokens in Guilds of Ravnica.
And Guilds of Ravnica, yeah.
Yeah, and Dominaria as well. So there's a lot of knights and a lot of sap rollings. Yep. So, or knights, soldiers, and sap rollings.
Yeah,
so tokens are pretty obvious. And then the other one that Max brought up is Dimir Control, because if you've played limited queues on Arena, you have lost to a Dimir deck that beats you with the sock full of nickels that is a pile of commons.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of their heavy lifting comes from their Darkblade agents, their Whisper agents, Watcher in the Mist, stuff like that. And I've put together on the screen now an approximation of what I think that deck looks like. I think Soul of the Rapids is better as your Watcher in the Mist because it has hexproof. So it kind of fades all the removal in the format. They'd have to literally double up on sweepers in order to take out your Soul of the Rapids. So I think it's a very potent finisher in control. But I also am running Darkblade and Whisper Agents because they're both extremely potent threats. So I think a lot of players are going to know that, and I think having access to things like Mephitic Vapors, Cosmotronic Wave, and Radiating Lightning are all really important. We talk a lot about that in the first Pauper Primer, because the Rats deck, if it becomes popular, the natural foil is anything that can handle getting rid of things with one butt. And so sweepers and tokens become very popular because you can make 2-3 cards while they're making 1 rat. And your value on trades is huge because the rats have no evasion.
That 1 toughness is a real bear when you can just put something in front of it, especially if you make a life-linking soldier token.
Right.
And things of that nature. So
just kind of know that those are, I think, the monocolor starter decks are going to be in there. I think the guilds we have access to thus far are going to be a popular choice, and I think rats as well as tokens out of the gate are going to be where people tend to go for their build. So I think those are very much a smart thing to keep aware of as you're playing through the game.
Absolutely. So now you've started off, you've got a plan, you have a decent idea of what you're going to see on the other side of the table. Now you're looking at actually putting your deck together. You want to put 60 cards together. What are some things you can think about? Making sure your cards do something. You know, we touched on this in the first section as well, but you can't wait for a bomb. Every card has to have an effect.
Yeah, it's really, really important that the card's in there and the card does something. With the Dimir control deck I have up, you can see I have Fungal Infection, I have Dazzling Lights. Those are to answer the aggro decks. Then I also have Essence Scatter, and I have Caligo Skin Witch that are in there to answer my mid-range problems. And then I have my Souls of the Rapids and my Small Creatures to help answer kind of and win the game from there, with Mephitic Vapors to sweep things up if I get in trouble against aggro, and Notion Rain and Secrets of the Golden City to help draw me through control matchups. So every single card choice I put in has a very distinct reason for existing, and I haven't gotten a chance to play with it yet, but right now I think this is a good preliminary configuration to kind of keep me alive through a myriad of matchups. Because remember, in this format, you're just going to play one game. You're not going to play a full set of 3 matches with sideboard.
Yeah. Pardon me. So a lot of what Max just described in there sounded a whole lot like Limited. You know, you want to make your creature trades, you want to make your combat tricks matter, you want to do a lot of things that are good Limited skills that translate here, because again, you don't really have bombs. I mean, yeah, you can absolutely go turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Elvish Rejuvenator, the one that gets a land in. Yes,
that's right. Yep.
Turn 2 Rejuvenator, and then that gets you to turn 4 Colossal Dreadmaw, and possibly turn 5 if you have another Llanowar Elf or Rejuvenator. You know, that's a real curve.
Yeah.
Or turn 4 Rejuvenator. That's the best way to do it. And so that's a thing that you can do, and that is a bomb in that case. But that's definitely more the exception than the rule. Most of the time, it's just play a curve, do combat tricks, do combat, play it like Limited. Especially because we still have Shock in the format, which was a premier removal spell last time and is absolutely going to be a premier removal spell this time. And this time, right into that Dimir control deck, we also, and any deck playing black, we also have Deadweight.
Yeah, Deadweight and Shock both cost a single mana, so you can double spell much more quickly. And this is kind of a limited piece of thought to have, is how quickly, if you're an aggro deck, you want to be what you call double spelling, casting 2 spells in the same turn as quickly as possible, because that's going to let you overwhelm your opponents. So you want to be able to get their blocker out of the way, and then you want to be able to swing. So cards like, I have Caligo Skin Witch in there, I thought real hard about Omen Speaker. Things like that are definitely good to consider because they have a 3-butt. They pass the shock test, they pass the Deadweight test. They're still
and they
on
do
the
something.
board. Yeah, and they have an ETB effect, which are both very powerful. So you want to make sure that your cards are doing something, and you want to make sure you understand how you win a game. If it's double spelling right away, if it's, like Dan said, casting things on a curve, or if you're a ramp deck, is it cheating things ahead of curve? Like, how quickly can I get down my 6/6 Trampler? You want to make sure you understand entirely what your deck's doing, not just how does the deck win or what's the deck trying to do in the early stages. You want to know from start to finish what your ideal plays are, because these micro decisions in Pauper show up a lot more pronounced, like they do in Limited, more so than they do in Constructed. Decisions are very important, but understanding the metagame can get you around that. There's no metagame here yet till we define it, and every little card you need to get every drop of value out of. So it's really, really important to make it a mental state that is very similar to Limited. You want to be able to get the most value out of every single card.
You absolutely do.
So the only deck I haven't displayed to close this out is this Aristocrat style deck I'm starting to muck around with. I had a lot of luck in the previous iteration of Pauper with a, like, Death Touch, bully effect kind of thing where you dealt damage with your creatures. There's only Rabid Bite now, and I think that's a little too little. to combine with death touch creatures that are a little bit more expensive for less power and toughness. But I do think that there is a value green black deck that could be pretty sweet, and I'll be testing it a bunch on our Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/superliminalfilms. If you want to check out Pauper, we will be playing a whole mess of it once that goes live. So,
anticipate Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for some amount of time.
Yeah, we'll try our best to get on pretty much during the weekend that surrounds this release, because we just love it a Pauper.
We do. So you've talked a bunch about the decks that you've got built already, right?
Yep.
What are some other decks that we are considering that will either be players, or if they're not players, are decks that people are going to build because they think they'll be players?
Some kind of wizard deck, probably a blue-red wizard deck, I think will be in there, because you have the Journey Mages.
Yeah, both of which are extremely powerful. Like, they're not quite what you'd call a wizard payoff, but they also are. Right,
because you also get Vishino Pyromancer, plus the Journey Mages is 8 creatures that come in and deal damage directly to your opponent.
So yeah, you have 16 damage right there.
Yeah, plus you get access to the other Journey Mage that bounces something for 4 if you have a wizard out, so that tops your curve off. You get a little bit of refueling with Opt, and you get to kind of push ahead with advantage, and you get to play all the burn suite. So it looks very much like a mono red deck splashing blue, I think, but I think people will absolutely be playing something akin to that.
You also still get Aven Windmage from the old Prowess deck from the last Pauper.
Yeah.
So we got wizards. One of the decks I'm personally quite in for is in line with what we were talking about before with the mono white deck from the starter. I think there's a deck that tops out at basically 3 with just some number of inspired charge on 4.
Yeah.
And you're done. Because there are 3 3/1s legal in this format. 2 of which cost 2 and 1 costs 3.
Yep.
And there's a 2/2 flyer for white. There's Cavalry Drillmaster. There's Martyr of Dust that leaves a token behind after it. Hunted Witness, which leaves a token behind. Healer's Hawk and the other bird, a Rustwing Falcon.
Yeah.
All of these things are powerful.
Cheap and evasive.
Absolutely.
So I think I think there's going to be more. So if you're thinking about something in particular, leave it in the comments underneath. If you tried one of the decks, let us know down below how you did. We had a lot of people who did really well with our initial primer stuff when the other Pauper existed with Amonkhet block and Kaladesh block. So if you tried something and it worked out great, let me know. If you toyed around with some stuff and it seems to be giving you results, let us know. We'd love to hear about all this stuff. Because we love the format. It's not just like, oh, it's a new format to Arena, so,
got to make a video because we do Arena content.
Yeah, if you stick around and hover around our YouTube channel, you'll see a bunch of other real Pauper stuff. You'll see the last Pauper Primer stuff. We like the commons around these parts.
We absolutely do. So thank you, everybody, for checking us out here today. Hope that the Pauper queues treat you very well this weekend, and I hope that if they come back in the future, they continue to treat you very well. Make sure you check us out. We're at www.superliminalfilms.com, also on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and right here on YouTube. Bye, everybody.
Play more commons.